Today on the Bandrew Says podcast, we're going to be analyzing the YouTube subscriber purge, why YouTube distanced themselves from Logan Paul, PewDiePie, and Shane Dawson, and a whole lot more, so go ahead and stick around. Greetings, Earthlings, and welcome back to episode 148 of the BSP. My name is Bandrew. This is What I Says. Like always, down below there are timestamps of everything that I talk about, so you can skip around and save a couple of minutes. But if you got the time, I would appreciate you, and I would just downright love you if you would listen to the entire thing. If you do want a different version of the podcast, either audio or video, you can find all of that stuff at bandrewsays.com. Let's jump right into it. One very short piece of news up top, and it would be that Waymo self-driving cars are going live in Arizona. So if you are somebody who lives in the Phoenix metro area, you can apply to be one of the early riders for Waymo self-driving cars. Now, I'm completely unaware if there will be a driver in these early access self-driving cars. I certainly hope so. But that's really the entire story. I will link the application process down in the show notes and description. And if you live in this area, in the Phoenix metro area, and you decide to be one of the early riders, maybe film it and send it in so I can include it in this podcast. That would be very fascinating to see. Next up, we're going to talk about an update to last week's story about homepage autoplay. So Trail of Liberty, one of the listeners to this podcast, sent in a video clip, which is included here in the video version of the podcast. And what it shows is that there is no ad on the homepage when it's previewing the video. It just has the captions on there. But once you do click on the video, then you are going to be served an ad. My deepest fears have been realized about how YouTube is going to monetize these previewed videos on the homepage. They are going the route, the awful route, as Facebook. Facebook did this exact same thing. Not the exact same thing. They would have the captions. They would put an ad maybe 2 minutes in so you get sucked in and you're like, I can't wait to see what comes next. Here's an ad. My worst fears have been realized. So thank you very much, Liberty, for sending that in. I appreciate you. And I'm loving this more interactive thing where people send in clips and audio clips, which you'll hear a little bit later when somebody's correcting me. Let's jump into the YouTube news. First thing, YouTube is deleting your subscribers. The 2018 YouTube subscriber purge. So on December 13th, YouTube released a blog post stating that creators will see a decrease in subscribers between December 13th and December 14th. And this decrease in subscriber count is actually caused by YouTube finding and removing a bunch of fake spam accounts which were paid for. Now, if you have never paid for spam subscribers to artificially boost your clout on YouTube, you're still going to be affected by this. And YouTube did come out with an explanation for that. They say that in order for these accounts to seem more legitimate, they would not just follow the one account that paid for those artificial follows or subscribers. These accounts would subscribe to a bunch of different YouTube channels to seem a lot more legitimate. Now, this entire move, in my opinion, is both good and bad. And first, we'll start with the good, which would be that YouTube's distribution of your video is based on the engagement and click-through rate of your video when it distributes that video to an initial group of subscribers. And if any of those subs are spam accounts, and they do get a video distributed to them, they're not going to be clicking on it. And that will make YouTube think that your video sucks and nobody wants to watch it, and they'll stop distributing that video as much, ultimately limiting the reach of that new thing that you've put out there because they think nobody likes this. But really, it's just we distributed this video to a bunch of spam accounts that nobody is even looking at. So that's why it would be good if YouTube deletes all of these spam accounts, because your video will now only be getting shown to actual users that have a much higher likelihood of clicking on your video, which will make you look a lot better in YouTube's eyes. And another big benefit, in my opinion, is that you will have a much better understanding of the subscriber base that you have and what kind of following you have. But now let's jump to the bad, and it has to do with the YouTube Partner Program. So I'm sure a lot of you are aware that YouTube changed the YouTube Partner Program threshold and requirements, and it requires that you have 1,000 subscribers and 4,000 hours of watch time. Well, if this subscriber purge leads to you dropping below the 1,000 subscriber threshold, you will actually be kicked out of the YouTube Partner Program, and you will have to grow up that subscriber base organically again to get above 1,000 subs. Then you have to reapply to be a part of that program to monetize your channel. And I've heard a lot of people complaining that it sometimes takes months. So you may have just lost the YouTube Partner Program until Q2 of 2019, which can suck if you have been relying on that. And that was a very big motivating factor for you to keep making videos on YouTube. I do actually think that is a good thing, though. And the reason I think that is I am sure that there are people who gamed the system by paying for subscribers to get above the 1,000 sub threshold, or have people watch their videos in these click farms. Just go ahead and click on all these videos to get above the 4,000 hours of watch time. And I think by removing that, it will make the YouTube Partner Program more legitimate and make it more difficult for people to game the system, which may ultimately lead to higher CPMs because there are less people in the YouTube Partner Program. I don't know if that makes any sense. That may be me just being kind of elitist, but I think it is better for the program as a whole. Now, out of curiosity, I did check my Social Blade here to see how I was affected. One day, I think I lost 5 subscribers, and then as a whole, on one day, in 1 hour, I lost 154 subscribers. So I wasn't terribly affected by this big purge. But out of more curiosity, I looked at PewDiePie and T-Series because that is the big subscriber battle going on right now. PewDiePie lost 43,000 subscribers in a 1 hour time frame, but T-Series lost 216,000 subscribers in a 1 hour time frame. That's more subscribers than I have on all of my channels combined. In 1 hour, just gone. God, that would be horrible. But that's it for that story. I'll link the blog post from YouTube in the show notes if you want to read more of their FAQ. Next, I want to talk about YouTube Rewind again. It is now the most disliked video on YouTube ever, and they accomplished this within 1 month of it being released. That is just good job, YouTube. I applaud you. You are legends. You have taken disliked videos to a new level. Good for you. But I have been seeing people talking about this video and saying they disliked it because where's PewDiePie? Where's the Logan Paul and KSI fight? Where's Shane Dawson? Well, I have some thoughts here, and it makes perfect sense to me why none of these people were in the YouTube Rewind this year. And YouTube clearly doesn't want to be associated with Logan Paul after the Suicide Forest incident, even though I guess YouTube did release his YouTube Premium show. I think that could be YouTube admitting that nobody's going to watch it because they don't care if they're associated with him there, but they don't want to be associated with him and have him in the YouTube Rewind because that's what they show to advertisers, and Logan Paul doesn't seem to be in advertisers' good graces right now. But on top of that, think about what kind of backlash YouTube got last year for having Logan Paul and Jake Paul in YouTube Rewind and having them be somewhat prominent. They got a lot of hate from the YouTube community, so why would they want to include them this year? But when they don't include them, they get trashed for not including them. It's a lose-lose for YouTube there. But it's also obvious why PewDiePie wasn't in YouTube Rewind this year. Think about who the most hated YouTuber is by general media. It's going to be PewDiePie. There's a hit piece or an article trashing him almost every single day. So if Pewds was in YouTube Rewind this year, I could almost guarantee that there would be some kind of article saying YouTube is pushing anti-Semitic content and the Nazi YouTube agenda. There would be something along those lines. As egregious and ridiculous as that would be, I think it would ultimately be in there, which is why YouTube would say, you know what? He may have had a huge year and gained 6 million subscribers in a month. Just what? Yeah, he did gain 6 million subs in a month, but we don't want to get that backlash. We don't want the general public to see a headline saying YouTube is associating with Nazi YouTuber. That would be very bad for YouTube's image, and advertisers would not like it at all. And then we get to Shane Dawson, which may be a little bit more difficult to justify the exclusion of him from YouTube Rewind, but I think I can do it. So stick with me. It may be a stretch, but I think I can do it. So if you look at what kinds of content that Shane has created in the past, there were lots of very insensitive characters in his early days. I don't remember what the character's name was, but he was clearly emulating a black person, and it was not the most sensitive thing that anybody could create. But also, Shane Dawson has had an entire series of conspiracy videos. Now, with the current climate of social media, where people seem to be digging through prior posts and videos of anyone trying to find some nugget of bad behavior to trash that person and destroy their career, and I am sure that Shane would have been exposed to some new higher level of scrutiny because of this. Or another option is maybe YouTube doesn't want to be accused of promoting another conspiracy theorist, which is what Shane Dawson has been doing a lot of over the last year. He had an entire series of conspiracy videos, and I'm sure a lot of you are aware that promoting conspiracy theorists is something that YouTube has been getting a lot of criticism for, especially when there's some new tragic event where some of the first search results are conspiracy theorists pushing their ideas. So that is my take on why YouTube didn't include Logan Paul, PewDiePie, or Shane Dawson. It makes perfect sense considering what YouTube Rewind seems to be. A lot of people have been saying it's a way for YouTube to show advertisers, here's what the offerings that we have. Here are the people you can advertise with. And if that's the case, they definitely don't want a Nazi, somebody who exploits mental well-being, or a conspiracy theorist. Those would not be good for advertisers, and I think YouTube made the right decision, and there you go. That's my take on it. And the last piece of YouTube news is that Gavin Mcinnes has been banned, and apparently this was the last platform that Gavin Mcinnes had access to respond to people's criticisms. He had already been banned from Patreon, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, I think, and pretty much everywhere else. This was the last place that he could post publicly. Now, Gavin Mcinnes was the founder of the Proud Boys, which is referred to by some as a men's club, but others as a gang. And the FBI recognizes that the Proud Boys is not an extremist group, but also states that it has links to white nationalism, and some individuals have potential to be violent and also may pose a national security threat. And I bring this up because Gavin Mcinnes wasn't banned for his association with this group because he's left the group, he's denounced the group, and he's no longer associated with the group. The reason he was banned was for copyright infringement. And the thing is, there's not multiple examples out there. There's only one video referenced, which I think is titled The Do's and Don'ts of Public Urination. So why am I bringing this up at all? Well, the video that I just mentioned was apparently a collaboration with Vans Shoes to create some kind of advertisement or sponsorship. And since the video no longer exists, I'm unable to get context of how that's incorporated in the video. Is it just an ad read? Is it a full brand sponsorship, brand deal? What is it? I have no idea. But because Vans helped pay for this, Vans may own the rights to that content since they essentially paid to get it made. Depends on the contract that Gavin had with Vans, but Vans may own the rights to that content. Therefore, this is the main reason. If working with a company affords them the ability to copyright claim your videos, perhaps it's time to stop working with companies at this level. If you worked with a company and then you say something that the public becomes outraged about, they can then get your channel taken down by copyright striking your video, even though they okayed the video in the past and now they just don't like the optics for them. That seems dangerous. Or maybe if you do decide to work with a company, just don't host that video on your channel. Have them host it on their own channel so they can just take it down if they want and they don't copyright strike your channel. And obviously, the better course of action if you are a sponsor of companies or if you're endorsed by companies or if you're endorsing companies. If you've signed any kind of contract with a company, you need to be careful. So it would be a much better course of action to be not a button pusher, or in Gavin's case, not be an a-hole, which I'll explain right now. So with all of that being said, while I was researching this story, I saw someone mention that Gavin had recently released a video stating that he was becoming anti-Semitic. Somewhat troublesome, somewhat problematic. And I was able to find a re-upload. I think it was the re-upload. Maybe it was the original. Maybe it wasn't. I don't know. But I found this video online, and I will link it in the show notes and description. And it's a rough one. So let's actually jump over to the conspiracy corner. It's been a while. Okay. So since we were not given any other videos mentioning copyright claims, only the do's and don'ts of public urination, which was a collaboration with Vans, that's the only example we were given. Could it be that they used a copyright claim as an excuse to remove Gavin's channel because he's clearly creating content that could be considered dangerous or hateful? Now, I don't know, because I am way out of my element on this story. I'm not an expert in talking about this stuff. I'm out of my element. This is much heavier than topics that I normally cover. But that does seem like a possibility, because YouTube bans people for infringing on copyrights 3 times. You need to have 3 copyright strikes on your channel before you get banned. And if only one video is given as a copyright claim or a copyright strike, one claim does not equal 3 strikes. So it could be that YouTube is just saying, you know what? Here's a good, easy out. People won't argue with a copyright claim because he just made a video stating that he's becoming anti-Semitic. But that seems like a very dangerous precedent, because what if a year down the road, people start getting angry that Neumann at one point in the 40s had made a microphone used by Hitler, and now I am reviewing a Neumann microphone, and now people are drawing a parallel saying, you're a Nazi, you're supporting Nazism because you are reviewing a microphone that was once used by Hitler. Now, keep in mind, we are currently in the conspiracy corner, and I am not stating any of this as fact. I just think that if his channel was deleted for copyright infringement and having 3 strikes on his channel, we should be given a list of those videos that infringed on that copyright and maybe see examples of that, rather than saying there's one video that was copyright striked and now his channel is gone for copyright infringement, because, as I mentioned, one video that is claimed does not equal 3 copyright strikes. Let's get out of here. As I mentioned, I'm out of my element and I don't like this. The conspiracy corner is getting dark. All right, let's go ahead and jump into the security news. And we got one thing here, and I titled it, Taylor Swift Wants Your Face. So let's go ahead and get some backstory here. Taylor Swift, very popular person. Henceforth, Taylor Swift does have stalkers, creepy stalkers. And lastly, Taylor Swift wants to, and possibly still is, scanning your face at her concerts. So according to the Rolling Stone, at Tay Swift's concert, yes, we're close enough that I call her Tay Swift. And no, Taylor, I am not your stalker. I'm just making a joke. Do not scan my face. But at her concert at the Rose Bowl on May 18th, 2018, there was a facial recognition camera inside a display showing highlights of her concert. And these images were then transferred to a base station and were cross-referenced with a database of Taylor Swift's known stalkers. I will admit, this does seem somewhat justified to protect Taylor Swift from dangerous people, but I gotta ask, what about all the other concert goers, the innocent concert goers, the 12-year-old girls, the 45-year-old men by the name of Doug Benson who loves Taylor Swift and is known to go to quite a few of her concerts? I would love to know, is Doug Benson on Taylor Swift's stalker list? Just a question. Would be interesting to, you know what? We're not going to go to the conspiracy corner. I don't want to burn any bridges here, but it doesn't just end with Taylor Swift. According to this article, Ticketmaster has also purchased a facial recognition company to provide concert goers with some added convenience. Just stop lying. This isn't for added convenience. This is just for added tracking. You want more information that you can use to sell off and market to people and track them around and then sell it off to whoever wants it. That's what this is all about. It's not about added convenience. Shut up with this stuff. Now, with that being said, I do understand that it is fully legal for them to do this. If I'm not mistaken, if I remember the last time I've gone to a concert, there's a little disclaimer saying, by attending this concert, you agree to have your face photographed and your likeness photographed. You give up those rights because there's a possibility that they are filming the show. Or maybe that some photographer is there taking pictures and he may show up there. You give up your rights there. So because of all of that, I am sure that this is perfectly legal and we would have zero recourse to sue these companies, these security companies, or these concert venues, because they do give you the disclaimer. If you don't want to be photographed, don't go to the show, which kind of sucks. But I got to ask, how long until you think this database gets hacked and leaked and your photo staring at Taylor Swift on a monitor is out on Facebook for all to see? And I just got to end this story by saying now concerts aren't even safe to go to without being tracked. It used to be you can't get one of those save cards. Then it was you can't go online. Then it was you can't go to grocery stores. Now it's you can't even go to concerts. I think the only safe place to go nowadays would be a farmer's market, but who wants to do that? Because you're just going to run into hippies who want to talk to you about crab apples and heirloom tomatoes. It sounds like the worst, but that's the only place you can go that doesn't seem like there's cameras tracking you everywhere. I'll link the article in the show notes. Let's get to what I've been testing. And this episode of the podcast concludes the run of the Rode NTG3. And I was planning on reviewing this microphone as soon as the run on the podcast ended, but now that I have to review the Rode Rodecaster Pro, that is going to take priority because it is a new device. People have a lot of questions, and that is going to be coming this next week. And I am going to postpone the NTG3 review because I don't want the reviews to be Rode device, Rode device, Rode device, Rode device. I want there to be a little bit of space so I don't become a Rode shill. I want there to be some space in between these stuff. But I would love to hear from you. What did you think of this microphone? Last week, I got a compliment or an insult saying, "You sound like an old man. You got that old man rasp to your voice." Could be because I'm becoming an old man. I don't know. Well, what do you think of this microphone? Next, we got what you had to say, and this is the thankful edition. But first, I want to address something, and it would be that apparently I say podcast wrong. This was brought up in the premiere stream that I did last week for episode 147, and somebody was saying, you say podcast wrong. It's podcast, 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 not podcast, which is how I say it. And I asked them to go ahead and send in a clip correcting me on how to say it. And let's go ahead and listen to that clip from Fiddleback.
Podcast. Podcast. Podcast.
I hear no difference between any of them, but I did in the voice chat in the Discord server this last week talk to people and try to figure out how I'm supposed to say it. It's apparently supposed to be said podcast, 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 podcast. I don't care. I'm committing to staying with how I say it, podcast. Welcome to my podcast. The Bandrew says podcast. It's not the Bandrew says podcast. No, I refuse to give in to social pressures. This is me taking a stand. I will say podcast. But what do you expect from a good fella from the East Coast? What do you expect from somebody like me, man? What do you expect? I would say it would serve y'all well to forget about it, or else I'll make you sleep with the fishes. That's lame. Let's get to the thankful. Jesus Christ. Let's get to the actual comments that you all left. The thankful segment thing. First comment comes from Z Alves. He says, the Fethead is the piece of equipment I am most thankful for. And poppycock. Z Alves, that is a great device. It is very helpful if you have a less powerful or a somewhat noisy preamp, which is pretty much any preamp that caps out at around 60 decibels, because if you have a dynamic microphone, you're going to be cranking it almost all the way up to 100%, and that will introduce noise regardless of how clean that interface's preamps are. So a Fethead, just a very, very invaluable tool for anybody running a dynamic microphone into an entry level or even a mid-level, a mid-tier interface. Also, Fethead, Cloud Lifter, I guess the Dynamite now, the McBoost, Simply Sounds SS1, and the Cathedral Pipes Durham. All of those do the same thing. Great, great selection, Z Alves. Next comes from Working Cows Podcast. He says, gear I am most thankful for. Gear I am most thankful for. I'll follow your lead with 3. Rode Procaster. Better than the borrowed mic I was using. Better than the ATR 2100 I would have bought myself. Sent to me from my Amazon wish list by a listener. JK Audio CellTap 4C, such a good tool for getting cell phone conversations into Reaper. Sent to me from my Amazon wishlist by a listener. Focusrite Scarlett 2i2 2nd Gen. Good clean preamps, plenty of gain to drive the Procaster. Sent to me from my Amazon wishlist by a listener. Working Cows Podcast. You have some amazing listeners sending you a very expensive microphone. I don't know what that CellTap device is, but that's amazing. And sending you an interface. That is an incredible, incredible fan base. That is just awesome. And those are all very, very good devices. And if I had your audience or an audience member sending me stuff, I wouldn't allow for that because I'm too paranoid to even have a public wish list. but I would be tremendously thankful as well. Very great selections. And I want to send a thank you to your audience as well. Send a thank you from Bandrew from Podcasted for providing you that gear. That's amazing. Awesome, awesome audience there. Next comment comes from Jay Brown. I am most thankful for my three pieces of gear are MPOW ground loop isolators. I'm recording in a 1930s built house and using a laptop with a Behringer Xenix 1204 USB mixer. It took me about 2 months and several wiring and extension cords to figure it out. Also, poppycock. Jay Brown, that is a very good selection, something I would not have considered, but it does make sense. If you're in an old wired house, chances are you're going to have some kind of ground loop issue, and an MPOW would really help solve that. That is a great, great selection. Like I said, never would have thought of that, but that will improve your audio quality tremendously, so you don't have that. That's my imitation of a 60 cycle hum. Anyways, next comment comes from Chaz Ravenel. He says, poppycock. Also, since I have to choose, I am most thankful for my Apogee Element 46 for its superb A to D and D to A conversion, 2 headphone outputs with dedicated constant current DACs, 4 combo inputs with 75 decibels of stepped gain for microphones, numerous I/O capabilities, and solid performance. Chaz, how dare you drop such a glowing review and recommendation and statement about the Apogee, Element 46? Because now I want to try it. And I can't afford to go down that road. I've already spent way too much money on interfaces, and I have a stack of them that I have to review, including, I'll go ahead and drop a little nugget for you folks still listening. It would be the RME Babyface. I got that one, the Babyface Pro. I am very excited to test that one out because it is very highly regarded. But now I want to try the Apogee Element. Damn it, Chaz! Damn it! Okay, next comment and last comment comes from Ducky McDuckson. Welcome, Ducky. Love you, man. Poppycock. I'm thankful for the boom arm. It's a nice piece of equipment, and he has the Neewer NB35, I think it is. And that is another excellent, excellent decision. Getting a boom arm to get the microphone stand off of your desk and out of your way is one of the most life-changing or podcast-changing experiences that I have had. When I used to have a kick drum stand just sitting on my desk in my way, I couldn't type on my keyboard. It just made it very cluttered. That helps so much. Great, great decision. Now, let's jump to the Ask Bandrew segment. All right. If you guys got any questions, I don't know what that was. If you guys got any questions, go ahead and send them to askbandrew@gmail.com, and I will likely answer them on an upcoming episode of the podcast. Now, I do want to note, I do not think that I am answering any duplicate emails, but I found a few submissions that were still flagged in my email to be answered, and that's where I pulled them from. They're from October, I think it is. So we're going back a little bit. I don't think I answered them. Couldn't find them in my podcast notes for previous episode. Yes, I said podcast notes for previous episodes, so I don't think we're getting duplicates. Dear sir, I own a Shure SM57 that I use for my voice. What is the right method to equalize the voice? Thanks, Jacopo. Jacopo, as far as setting an EQ for your voice, there is no such thing as a universal setting. Just doesn't exist. It differs from person to person, voice to voice, room to room, and all of that. There are too many factors to say everybody using this microphone on their voice should EQ it this way. That doesn't exist. I will tell you this. Don't EQ something for the sake of EQing it. Only EQ with a purpose. So if you hear a microphone that is too nasally, go ahead and cut out some of those nasal frequencies. If it's too sibilant, try pulling out some of those frequencies or using a de-esser. Don't just EQ because you think it's something that needs to be done, because it doesn't. If you do EQ, it should be done with a purpose, and that's all I can say, because there's no such thing as a universal EQing setting for different microphones, because voices, rooms, environments, everything changes way too much. Next email, or this is actually a comment, comes from Working Cows Podcast. Again, awesome audience. He says, I have a unique audience. They are ranchers. Many of them listen... Oh, God. Drinking coffee was a bad decision. He says, many of them listen in noisy environments. Sorry about that. Is there anything wrong with boosting my master mix as high as possible without introducing distortion? Working Cows, that is a very, very good question. I would personally not do this unless I knew 100% that every single person listening to my podcast was expecting that big jump in audio when going from the last podcast they were listening to. What I would recommend is maybe getting a piece of software like Auphonic, or I think Auphonic does allow for free processing for maybe an hour per month. You could see if you like it, if it does improve the listenability of your podcast for those ranchers listening in loud environments. And what it does is it analyzes the audio signal that you're putting in, and it says, what LUFS level do you want? Right now, the standard, and I'm putting that in quotes, is -16 LUFS. I think you could get away with going up to -15, -14. -14 is what the ALEXA, the woman in a tube thing, actually requires to get your podcast submitted to them. So I think you could get away with doing that. That really does help with getting a good level, a good listening level. Something else, a lot of podcasts don't compress too much. There are some that do compress too much, but compression helps with listening in loud environments, because if you get far away from your microphone, your voice gets very quiet and it gets difficult to hear. But when you add compression, that boosts the low parts, decreases the high parts, and then you could bring the entire track up. It will introduce more of that underlying preamp noise and everything, but it will make your voice much more easy to listen to, and it will keep the ranchers from having to go up and down on their volume controls. Why are words so hard today? So I would say check out doing a little bit more compression than you would normally do. I would say it is okay to sound a little bit less natural because it is serving a purpose, and then run it through a leveling software like Auphonic to get -16 at the minimum. And I would say it probably would be okay to go up to -14, and you should be good to go. Next email comes from Tim. He says, hey, Bandrew, check out the new SE Electronics DM1 Dynamite. They are claiming 28 decibels of clean gain. Cheers, Tim. I actually did check this out. I put a video of that on the Podcastage 2 channel, comparing it to the Fethead and the Cloudlifter CL1. I'll link that in the description down below. Don't know if I'm going to be doing a full review of it because it does so little. It's just one thing. Don't know if I could justify a full video on the Podcastage channel. Hopefully that will help you in any decision that you need to be making. Next email comes from Frank. Bandrew, longtime listener and watcher, so I upgraded my interface to the UAD Aero. That being said, I have that coupled with the SM7B, and honestly, it was your test that sold me on this setup. In an effort to give you all the info needed, my chain goes SM7B, Cloudlifter, UAD console to Logic Pro X. After home engineering for other people for quite some time, I have decided to get into voiceover work myself. That being said, with the UA Aero, I was curious if you are still utilizing this interface or any other UAD interface, and what UAD plugins do you find to be the best suited for standard VO podcast style work? Thank you, Frank. Frank, yes, I am still using the UAD Aero. I am currently using it right now. I use it on every single podcast. I cannot go away from it. I am bought into the ecosystem. I love the plugins and everything. The plugins that I would normally use for my voice would be the Neewer, plug in the Neewer Unison preamp into the 1176 LN. That will be the first one, and I try to get 1 to 3 decibels of compression there. And lastly, I will run that into the Universal Audio LA2A, which just fattens it up, makes it a little bit not boomier, but just fuller sounding, adds a lot of musical compression, and it's a lot slower. It's not as aggressive as the 1176, but you gotta be slight with both of them, and I love them. But right now, I am not using the Neve. I am playing around with the Manly Vox Box, which was 50 or 60% off, which is why I finally bought it. And I'm never going to spend the money on the actual hardware Vox Box, which is, what is it, $4,000 or more? So I'll pay $150 to play with that. There you go. That's what I use. If it is necessary in post, I will run de-reverb, de-plosive, de-essing, and a couple of other noise removal things. But just like I said for, who was it? Jacopo, don't do it just for the sake of doing it because you think you need to. Only use these effects if it is 100% necessary. If the reverb is too much, or if you have some sibilance issues, don't just think, I need to add this to every single podcast, and yeah, don't do that. So use it sparingly, I guess. That's the moral of this episode. Use it sparingly. Next email. So I hope that helped. Next email comes from the eldest bro. Hello, Bandrew. Today I don't have an audio question for you. Just wanted to ask, how is your day so far? I hope your day is going well and that you have a good week. Your oldest bro, eldest. Hey there, oldest. What is it now? The sparkiest blue. Whatever your name is in the Discord server, I can't remember right now. The oldest blue. I'm doing very well. Thank you for asking. I appreciate you caring. I love you, man. I appreciate you. I'm doing well. I hope you're doing well. And I hope you have a great work week. I am recording this a little bit earlier. It's not even noon yet. I love it. Let me take a sip of coffee because still got some left. And somebody said, I've never seen Bandrew take a sip of water on the podcast. Maybe that is why he gets the speech impediment. No, it's because I forget to swallow my saliva and then it just pools in my mouth. It's disgusting. It's the worst. The last email comes from Brian. He says, just want to say I really enjoy your content and watched pretty much all of it all the way through. Brian, thank you so much. You are an absolute legend. Sorry it took me so long to get to this. I don't have very complex questions. Just a few things I would like to hear your opinion on. What did you think of the Lone Gunmen and their short-lived spinoff? Are you going to participate in No Shave November? Whoops. Again, whoops. I think it would be awesome to see you with a full-on Grizzly Adams beard. Lols. Any thoughts on Twin Peaks? Also, what shows are you into on Netflix? Have you checked out Bill Burr's F is for Family or Altered Carbon? Altered Carbon. Thanks again and keep up the good work, Brian. Great questions. As I'm sure all of you are fully aware of, as the podcast progresses, my ability to speak decreases. There is an inverse correlation. Anyways, as far as the Lone Gunmen spinoff, I loved it. I absolutely loved it. It was inherently much goofier, much more slapsticky, much more comedic than X-Files Prime. X-Files proper, but I really liked it because I am a big fan of those characters themselves. I love Fro Hickey, I love Byers, and I love, why can't I think of the last guy's name? Fitzgerald, right? John Fitzgerald? No, I can't think of the names. But regardless, I really liked that show, and I would recommend it to any big X-Files fan because it does grow on the mythology around the Lone Gunmen, and you go a little bit more in depth, and you get some fun characters, and you giggle a lot. And then episode 1, the pilot, look at what date that was published, and then look at the relationship to 9/11. Oh God, it has to suck to be a writer on that. I think I talked about that in the early 50s of this podcast because that's when I first watched the show, and I was shocked to see what happened there. Next portion of your email, No Shave November. I am sure you are all fully aware by now that no, I did not do No Shave November. I cannot grow a full Grizzly Adams beard if my life depended on it. I would just look like a creepy weirdo. So no, I do not take part in that. I should donate to, male prostate cancer research, something like that. That's what it's for. I should donate to that. That's what I should do because I can't grow a beard. Although I should also donate to helpgrowbeards.com. Whatever research company is doing that. Thoughts on Twin Peaks? I've never really gotten into it, never really watched it. I do know that Duchovny plays a cross-dresser in that show, and that made me want to watch it because I'm a big Duchovny fan, but I have not watched much of it. I think I watched the first season, but I did not watch the second one, so I don't know how that goes. I have not watched the new season, or I think there's a movie as well. Haven't gone too deep into that. As far as F is for Family, I love that show. It is very relatable being a kid that grows up in an older time, not such a helicopter parent time, in an older time where there was discipline, a lot more strict discipline. Very relatable, very funny. Really enjoy that show. A lot of people don't like Bill Burr because he could be considered a sexist. I don't view him as that. I love that show. And I have never watched Altered Carbon either. The thing that I've noticed is that I have been watching less and less Netflix because they just seem to be releasing too much stuff. Back in my day, they used to release one show or one comedy special every single week or maybe every single month, and they focused a lot more on making it super high quality. But once they realized how, I guess, beneficial that is for people subscribing to Netflix, it seems like they just started releasing a new show every single day. And it's just overwhelming. There's too much to watch, and you don't know what's going to be good. People don't have the ability to say, oh, I got so excited about this, and I got so excited about Stranger Things, and I watched it in the first weekend because there's too many shows coming out. So I don't think that there's much that I'm watching on Netflix as far as series or movies. I've just been going more towards the physical media again. I just finished watching the entire run of Tales from the Crypt. I bought the DVD set for like $30 on eBay, and it took me a couple of months to work my way through that. Just picked up the entire Seinfeld series on Blu-ray on Black Friday, I think it was. And I have a stack of Blu-ray horror films that I'm working through right now. But I had so much fun with this episode. I really liked the feedback that I got, the interactivity, people sending in clips, audio clips, video clips, all of that stuff. It was super, super cool. I want to keep that going. So I'm going to pose a question to everybody here again. Sorry, my nose is running again. But what is your favorite series or movie on Netflix or any streaming service for that matter? Is there one streaming service that you prefer, and why do you prefer that one over any others? That's going to do it for today. Thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you for listening. I appreciate all of you. Again, askbandrew@gmail.com if you want to send anything into the show, and I will see you all next week. My headphones are getting tangled. Bye.
This has been a Geeks Rising production. Your executive producer of Bandrew Scott. For more information, head over to www.geeksrising.com.